Okay, so this is just to show you how you get that heterozygous cross, and you know that you automatically get the 9:3:3:1 ratio that we talked about before. It's the same slide that you saw in the other notes. I just want to make sure you really get this one. I would anticipate you will see a dihybrid cross on the EOC, and this is the new piece that most people get confused on. So I had my parent generation, they made it, and they made all heterozygous offspring. So then if the heterozygous offspring were to reproduce, you would have heterozygous and a heterozygous. So you see, you get the same gametes that we saw before. Remember, first to first, and that gives you that one. First to second, and that gives you that one. Then second to first, and it gives you this one. And second to second, and gives you that one. And the other female is, or the other male is exactly the same genotype. Okay, so then when you do your crossing, you come up with that, there's 9 boxes that are going to be yellow and round. There's 3 boxes that are going to be green and round, 3 boxes that are green or yellow and wrinkly, and only 1 box that is green and wrinkly. So just want to make sure you draw that to your attention. Okay, this is the next piece that shows a trihybrid. So you can see it gets really crazy when you have 3 alleles that you're then trading for. Okay, definitely crazy. Okay, now we're getting into the stuff that's the new pieces. Talking about what's a carrier. This is one of your vocabulary words. What is it? Carrier is basically a heterozygous genotype. And what that means is we know that dominant is the one that's always expressed. So if you're heterozygous, you're carrying this recessive allele, but it only gets expressed if you have 2 of those recessive alleles present. Okay, and in this case, we're looking at cystic fibrosis, which is a disorder where you get mucus built up in your lungs. It can be fatal or shorten the life expectancy of an individual. However, great strides in gene therapy and so forth, and controlling that and increasing the longevity of the folks that have cystic fibrosis. But if you do your cross, and you can see both parents carry the cystic fibrosis gene, so 75% of their offspring have the chance to be just fine. It's a quarter this recessive allele then would be expressed, and that individual would have cystic fibrosis, and that's where it becomes expressed. All right, sex-linked chromosomes or traits are carried on the sex-linked chromosomes, and you see this when you're doing your dragon activity. Okay, so you can be a female, which is XX, and you can carry whatever that trait is coding for as a heterozygous individual. You can also be homozygous, and in this case we're talking about color blindness, which color blindness is only expressed if both recessive alleles are present. So you can only be a female with color blindness if you have both recessive alleles. Not very frequently in our population, which is why you don't see very many females that are colorblind. Males, however, because they only have one X chromosome, if they have that recessive allele on that one X chromosome, it gets expressed, which is why we see colorblindness in more men than we do in women. This is also true of hemophilia, which is sometimes known as bleeder's disorder. You don't have the appropriate coagulating materials in your blood to, like if you get a cut, to coagulate the blood and stop the bleeding and form a scab. Also, muscular dystrophy falls in that same category, which is the sheathing on your muscles is not present, and you have skeletal muscle control issues. Typically, you see these folks walking with the crutches or they're wheelchair bound because they've lost control of their skeletal muscles. All right, so that is what sex-linked traits are, and they're specifically carried on the X and the Y chromosomes. A couple other things that you need to know of. There can be X chromosome inactivation, meaning the X chromosome is turned off. And this is kind of a cool little tidbit. In your textbook on page 352, it talks to you about this whole activation of chromosome things, and how if you see typically house cats that have 2 colored spots, you can automatically assume that they're female because they have each of those colored spots is represented on each one of those chromosomes. Males then, because they only have 1 chromosome, can only have 1 color spots typically. Okay. Also, another vocabulary word is non-disjunction. And non-disjunction is seen when normally we know because of the law of segregation, homologous chromosomes are supposed to separate during meiosis. Well, if they fail to separate, and look at that word is spelled incorrectly. If they fail to separate, then you might have extra chromosomes. And that's exactly what you see in folks that have Down syndrome, is they have an extra 21st chromosome. Okay. All right. And we'll talk about more of that in class tomorrow too. Incomplete dominance is where neither allele is completely dominant or recessive. So you get colors that present as blended. For instance, you can see here, and you've got these pretty little flowers. Neither white nor red is completely dominant, and when you have a heterozygous individual, then they show this blended version, this pink version, as incomplete dominance. So that's what that is. So this would be homozygous for red, and this would be homozygous for white. And then when you're heterozygous, instead of being dominant, like we've seen in the past, you would be this blended pink color. That's incomplete dominance. Okay, next slide. Talking about codominant alleles and multiple alleles. Two more vocabulary words. Codominant alleles you see when both of your alleles are dominant. So when they're both present in the heterozygous form, they both get expressed. And you see this in this hermit chicken, which maybe you've seen, or if you raise them at the farm. Both the black and the white feathers are dominant. So when you're heterozygous, you get both black and white expressed. Okay. That's also true with blood types A and B. They're both dominant, so sometimes you see in the population who have A blood type or B blood type. If you're heterozygous, then you have both A and B blood present, antigens present in your body. And we'll talk about blood typing a little bit more when we do an activity tomorrow. Multiple alleles, blood typing is also a good example of this. We've been looking at alleles that just focus on two letters, like, capital B, lowercase b, or capital W, lowercase w. Now we're talking about multiple alleles. So you've got A, B, and O. Okay, so A, B, and O are what make up your blood type. Okay. Linked genes. This is why you typically see redheads with freckles. Okay, redheads with freckles. It's because the red hair coloring and the freckles are close to each other on the chromosomes. So when the chromosomes separate, those two genes typically travel together. They don't separate, they stay together. And that's why you get that. And that's called linked genes. And it all has to do with where they're located on the actual chromosome. All right. There's just red hair, red freckles, why you see it. All right, last two things are polygenic traits, and hair color and eye color are two of your best polygenic traits because they're not caused by just one gene on one chromosome. They're caused by multiple genes on multiple chromosomes, and that's why we call them polygenic. Poly means many, right, as a prefix. And last one is the epistatic gene. Epistatic gene is the trump gene. If you have it, regardless of what it's coding for, it automatically is dominant. And albinoism is definitely an example of that epistatic gene. Okay? If you have it, it is automatically expressed. All right, so those are your notes for tonight, and I will see you in class tomorrow for a short quiz. Bye.